The hospital room was unusually quiet. The machines hummed softly, lights dimmed low, and the clock on the wall seemed unbearably loud with every passing second. Michael Jackson lay still on the bed, his body exhausted, his breathing shallow, his face thinner than anyone remembered seeing it before. The doctor had been in countless hospital rooms before. He had delivered bad news. He had witnessed final moments. He thought he was prepared. He wasn't. As the doctor finished adjusting the monitors and turned to leave, Michael slowly opened his eyes and spoke. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper, but his words were clear. "Doctor, can I tell you something?" The doctor stopped. What Michael Jackson said next, simple, quiet, and painfully human, cut through years of fame, controversy, and legend. It wasn't about music. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about death. It was about regret, fear, and something he had never said out loud to anyone who wasn't family. By the time Michael finished speaking, the doctor was crying. He would later say that no medical training, no professional distance, and no years of experience could have prepared him for that moment. Because in that hospital room, Michael Jackson wasn't the king of pop. He was just a man who knew time was running out. What did Michael say in those final minutes? Why did it stay with the doctor for the rest of his life? And why has this story never been told publicly? Until now. Stay with the story. Because this final conversation reveals a side of Michael Jackson the world almost never saw. The hallway outside the hospital room was filled with a quiet urgency that only exists in places where life hangs in the balance. Nurses moved softly, their shoes barely making a sound against the polished floor. A faint antiseptic smell lingered in the air, mixed with a low hum of machines that never slept. Inside room 614, Michael Jackson lay still, his body worn down by exhaustion, pressure, and years of carrying more weight than anyone was meant to bear. It was late, well past midnight, but sleep refused to come. Michael's eyes were half open, staring at the ceiling, watching the slow rhythm of shadows move as machines blinked and lights dimmed. Every breath felt deliberate, as if his body had to remind itself to keep going. His hands rested lightly on the blanket, thin fingers motionless, veins visible beneath pale skin. The doctor entered quietly, holding a clipboard close to his chest. He had reviewed Michael's charts countless times that night. Vital signs, medications, notes from earlier visits. On paper, everything looked manageable. In reality, something felt different. There was a heaviness in the room that statistics could not explain. "Michael," the doctor said softly, careful not to startle him, "how are you feeling right now?" Michael turned his head slightly. His eyes focused slowly, as if it took effort just to bring the world into view. When he spoke, his voice was fragile but calm. "Tired," he said. "Very tired." The doctor nodded. He had heard that word many times from Michael before, but tonight it sounded heavier, final in a way that made the doctor uncomfortable. "I'm going to check your vitals again," the doctor said. "Just try to relax." As the doctor adjusted the monitor and checked the readings, Michael's gaze followed him. There was an intensity in his eyes, not fear exactly, but awareness, the kind that comes when someone senses that a moment matters more than others. "Doctor," Michael said quietly, "yes. Do you believe people know who they really are before they go?" The doctor paused. That wasn't a medical question. He turned slightly, meeting Michael's eyes. "I think," the doctor said carefully, "that sometimes people understand themselves more clearly when things slow down." Michael nodded, as if that answer confirmed something he already suspected. "My whole life," Michael said slowly, "everything moved so fast. Tours, albums, expectations, noise everywhere. I never got silence." The doctor set the clipboard down on a nearby counter, giving Michael his full attention. This was no longer a routine visit. "And now?" the doctor asked. "Now it's quiet," Michael said, "and I can finally hear myself think." There was a long pause. The machines continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the gravity of the moment. Michael took a shallow breath. "People think I was never scared," he said. "They think I was fearless on stage, that I loved the spotlight." The doctor didn't interrupt. "But the truth," Michael continued, is that I was always afraid. Afraid of disappointing people. Afraid of being misunderstood. Afraid of being alone. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. The doctor felt his throat tighten. He had treated celebrities before, but something about Michael's openness, his lack of performance, his complete honesty, made this different. "You're not alone right now," the doctor said gently. Michael offered a faint smile. "I know, but I mean inside." Michael's eyes drifted toward the window, where the city lights glowed faintly in the distance. "I gave the world everything I had," he said. "My body, my mind, my childhood, and I don't regret loving people. I wish I had learned how to love myself without needing applause." The doctor felt something shift inside him. He had studied human anatomy for years, but nothing had prepared him for the anatomy of regret. "Michael," the doctor said carefully, "you've touched more lives than you'll ever know." Michael shook his head slowly. "That's not what I'm worried about." He turned his head back, eyes searching the doctor's face. "I'm worried about whether my children will know the real me, not the headlines, not the stories. Just me." The room fell silent again. "They will," the doctor said, though his voice wavered slightly. "They will remember their father." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Tears had begun to pool, threatening to spill, but never fully falling. "Doctor," Michael whispered, "I just wanted to be kind. That's all I ever wanted." That was when the doctor felt it, the unmistakable sting behind his eyes. He looked away briefly, pretended to check the monitor, but the emotion was already there, impossible to stop. "You were kind," the doctor said, his voice breaking despite his efforts. "You still are." Michael exhaled slowly, as if releasing something he'd been holding for decades. "Thank you," he said, "for seeing me." The doctor nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He had entered the room as a professional, trained to diagnose and treat. But he was leaving it changed, because in that quiet hospital room, he hadn't met an icon. He had met a man who finally felt heard. And he knew, deep down, that this conversation would stay with him for the rest of his life. The doctor remained in the room long after he should have left. Time seemed suspended inside those four walls, as if the hospital itself understood that something rare was unfolding. Michael lay quietly, eyes half open, his breathing shallow but steady. The silence between them was not awkward. It was heavy, meaningful, filled with everything that had not yet been said. After a few minutes, the doctor cleared his throat softly. "Michael," he said, "do you want to call someone?" "Your family." Michael didn't answer right away. His gaze drifted to the ceiling again, tracing invisible lines, as if following memories only he could see. "No," he said finally, "not yet." The doctor nodded, respecting the choice. He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, something he almost never did during late-night rounds. But this was no longer a routine shift. This was a human moment. "You know," Michael began, his voice low but steady, "people always wanted answers from me. Interviews, press conferences, questions about my music, my life, my choices. Everyone wanted something." He paused, swallowing with effort. "But no one ever asked me how it felt to carry all of it." The doctor felt a familiar pressure in his chest, the kind that came when someone entrusted you with something fragile. "How does it feel?" he asked gently. Michael let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Heavy," he said. "So heavy that sometimes I thought I would disappear under it." He turned his head slightly, looking directly at the doctor. "Do you know what it's like to be loved by millions and still feel invisible?" The doctor didn't answer immediately. He knew better than to offer easy comfort. "I can't imagine," he said honestly. "But I can hear you." Michael nodded. "That's more than most people ever did." Another pause. The machines continued their steady beeping, marking time in a way that felt almost cruel. "I learned how to perform before I learned how to be," Michael said. "Before I understood who I was, the world told me who I had to be." The doctor leaned forward slightly. "And who are you?" he asked. Michael's lips trembled. For a moment, it looked like the question might be too much. Then, quietly, he answered. "I'm someone who loves deeply," he said. Someone who feels too much. Someone who never stopped being that little boy who wanted to be safe. His eyes glistened now, tears finally escaping and sliding slowly down his cheeks. The doctor reached for a tissue and handed it to him without a word. I spent my whole life trying to protect that child, Michael continued. Building walls. Creating worlds where innocence could survive. But I don't know if I ever protected myself. The doctor felt his own eyes burn again. He had seen pain in many forms. Physical trauma, terminal illness, sudden loss. But this was different. This was a lifetime condensed into a single fragile moment. You did the best you could, the doctor said softly. Michael shook his head. I did what I knew how to do, he replied. But knowing how to love others doesn't mean you know how to heal yourself. He took another shallow breath. There's something I need to say, he added, his voice dropping even lower. The doctor straightened slightly. I'm listening. Michael hesitated, as if choosing each word carefully. If I don't wake up tomorrow, he said, I need someone to understand this. The doctor's heart sank, but he kept his voice calm. Understand what? That I tried. Michael said, I tried to be good. I tried to make beauty out of pain. I tried to turn suffering into something that could help others feel less alone. Tears rolled freely now, no longer restrained. I don't want to be remembered for rumors, Michael said, or for mistakes. I want to be remembered for kindness. The doctor's composure finally cracked. His eyes filled, and this time he didn't look away. You will be, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I promise you. Michael studied his face, as if searching for truth there. Then he gave a small nod. Doctor, Michael whispered, what do you do when you forgive everyone, but you don't know how to forgive yourself? The question hit like a blow. The doctor took a deep breath. I think, he said slowly, forgiveness starts when you stop judging yourself by the expectations of people who never carried your burden. Michael closed his eyes again. I hope you're right. The room grew quiet once more. Outside, somewhere in the hospital, a phone rang. A cart rolled past. Life continued, unaware of the gravity inside room 614. After a while, Michael spoke again, so softly the doctor almost missed it. Thank you for staying, he said. There's nowhere else I need to be right now, the doctor replied. Michael's breathing slowed slightly. His face looked calmer, almost lighter, as if something heavy had finally been set down. The doctor glanced at the monitor, then back at Michael. Medically, nothing dramatic had changed. But emotionally, everything had. As he stood to leave, Michael reached out weakly, his fingers brushing the doctor's sleeve. One more thing, Michael said. Yes? The doctor answered immediately. If you ever tell this story, Michael said, tell it right. Tell them I was human. The doctor swallowed hard. I will, he said. I swear. Michael's hand relaxed, falling back onto the blanket. His eyes closed again, this time peacefully. The doctor stepped out into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind him. Only then did he allow the tears to fall, because he knew, without any medical chart or monitor telling him, that he had just witnessed something sacred, not the final words of a legend, but the truth of a man. The hallway outside room 614 felt colder than before. The doctor stood there for a long moment, one hand resting against the wall, trying to steady himself. In all his years of medicine, he had been trained to separate emotion from duty, empathy from collapse. But what had just happened inside that room did not fit into any protocol. He took a slow breath, wiped his eyes, and forced himself back into motion. There were charts to update, nurses to speak with, procedures to follow. And yet, everything felt secondary now, like background noise to a truth that refused to be ignored. Inside the room, Michael Jackson lay quietly, eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in shallow, measured breaths. The tension that had lived in his face earlier was gone. His brow was smooth, his jaw unclenched. It was as if speaking those words, finally, honestly, had released something that medication never could. A nurse entered softly, checking the 4 lines, adjusting the monitor. She glanced at Michael, then at the chart. He seems calmer, she whispered. Yes, the doctor replied. He is. The nurse hesitated. Do you want me to call the family now? The doctor looked at Michael again. He remembered the way Michael had said not yet, the care in his voice, the need for control over at least one small thing in a life where control had always been an illusion. Give him a little more time, the doctor said. If he wakes, let me know immediately. The nurse nodded and left. The hours that followed moved strangely. Time stretched and compressed at once. Michael drifted in and out of light sleep, occasionally murmuring words too faint to understand. Sometimes his fingers twitched, as if reaching for something unseen. Other times, he lay completely still, the quiet punctuated only by the steady rhythm of the machines. At one point, just after midnight, Michael's eyes opened again. The doctor was there almost instantly. I'm here, he said, keeping his voice low. Michael blinked slowly, orienting himself. When his gaze found the doctor, there was recognition and relief. I thought I was alone, Michael whispered. You're not, the doctor replied. Michael swallowed. I keep thinking about my children. The doctor pulled the chair closer and sat down again. Do you want to talk about them? Michael nodded. They're still so young, he said. I worry about the world they'll have to face. A world that sees their last name before it sees their hearts. His voice wavered. I try to give them what I never had. Safety, love, presence. But I'm scared it won't be enough. The doctor listened, saying nothing, allowing the silence to hold the weight of the confession. You gave them something priceless, the doctor said finally. You show them what gentleness looks like. Michael's lips curved into the faintest smile. I hope they remember that, he said. Not the noise, not the cameras. Just me. He closed his eyes again, exhausted by the effort of speaking. Minutes later, his breathing became uneven. The monitor showed subtle changes, not a crisis, but a shift. The doctor stood, alert, watching carefully. Michael stirred. Doctor, he murmured. Yes, Michael. Do you think people are afraid of silence? He asked suddenly. The question caught the doctor off guard. Why do you ask? Because whenever things got quiet, Michael said, that's when I could finally hear myself. But the world never let it stay quiet for long. The doctor considered this. I think silence scares people because it forces them to listen, he said. And not everyone likes what they hear. Michael nodded slowly. I always listened, he said. Too much. A tear slid from the corner of his eye. I carried other people's pain, Michael continued. I absorbed it. Fans, strangers, children. I wanted to heal them, but I didn't know how to stop it from hurting me too. The doctor felt the weight of that truth settle between them. You're allowed to rest now, he said gently. You don't have to carry anything else tonight. Michael's breathing slowed again. His grip on consciousness loosened. Just before he drifted off, he whispered, Promise me something. Yes, the doctor said immediately. Don't let them turn this into a spectacle, Michael said. No drama, no headlines, just dignity. The doctor nodded, though he knew how fragile that promise was in a world that fed on fame. Still, he said the only words that mattered. I promise to do my best. Michael slept. Outside the room, the hospital moved through the night. Nurses changed shifts. Phones rang. Somewhere, a television murmured softly in a waiting room. Life continued, unaware that one of the most famous men on earth lay quietly wrestling with the simplest human fears, being misunderstood, being forgotten, being reduced to a symbol instead of remembered as a soul. At around 3 a.m., the doctor stepped out to make a call, not to the press, not to administrators, but to Katherine Jackson. When she answered, her voice was already tight with worry. How is my son? She asked. The doctor chose his words carefully. He's stable, he said, but more than that, he's been very reflective tonight. There was a pause on the line. Has he been afraid? She asked. No, the doctor said honestly. He's been honest. Katherine exhaled a soft, trembling sound. That's Michael, she said. He always saved his truth for quiet moments. After the call, the doctor returned to the room. Michael was still asleep, peaceful. The doctor sat again, watching the rise and fall of his chest. thinking about everything Michael had said about forgiveness, identity, humanity. He realized then that whatever happened next, this night would stay with him forever. Because legends didn't come here. People did. And tonight, Michael Jackson had been nothing less and nothing more than a man asking to be seen. Morning arrived quietly, almost disrespectfully so. The pale light of dawn filtered through the narrow hospital window, landing softly across Michael Jackson's face. For a brief moment, the room looked ordinary. Just another patient, another bed, another set of machines humming in the background. But the doctor knew better. Nothing about this night or this man was ordinary. Michael was awake again. He stared at the ceiling, eyes open but unfocused, as if he were watching memories pass above him instead of fluorescent lights. When he noticed a doctor standing nearby, he turned his head slightly. "You stayed?" Michael said. "I did," the doctor replied. "I told you I would." Michael nodded, visibly relieved. "People usually leave," he said quietly. "They always say they'll come back. Most don't." The words were not accusatory. They were observational, spoken by someone who had learned over a lifetime to expect absence. The doctor pulled the chair closer. "I'm here now," he said. "That's what matters." Michael closed his eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When he opened them again, his gaze was sharper, more present. "I need to tell you something," he said. The doctor leaned forward. "Go ahead." Michael hesitated. For the first time since the night before, fear flickered across his face. Not fear of pain or death, but fear of being misunderstood. "All my life," Michael began, "people spoke about me. Rarely to me. They decided who I was, what I meant, what I represented. Even my silence was interpreted as something dramatic." He swallowed. "I learned early that the world doesn't listen to quiet truths. It only listens to noise." The doctor remained silent, letting Michael set the pace. "I try to be good," Michael continued. "Not perfect. Good. Kind. Gentle. But kindness doesn't sell headlines. Pain does. Fear does. Scandal does." His voice tightened. "Do you know how exhausting it is to be a symbol instead of a person?" The doctor nodded slowly. "I can imagine," he said, "but I don't think most people ever truly consider it." Michael gave a faint, sad smile. "That's because imagination requires empathy," he said. "And empathy slows things down. The world doesn't like to slow down." A long silence followed. Outside, a cart rattled down the hallway. Somewhere, a monitor beeped steadily. "I'm not afraid of dying," Michael said suddenly. The doctor looked at him, surprised by the calm certainty in his tone. "I'm afraid of disappearing," Michael clarified, "of being erased beneath versions of myself I never chose." He turned his head toward the window. "They'll talk about the records, the performances, the controversies, but they won't talk about how much I love bedtime stories, or how I cried watching my children sleep because I was grateful they were safe." His voice broke. "They won't talk about how hard I tried." The doctor felt a tightness in his chest. "Then let someone who heard you remember," he said. "Let me remember." Michael looked back at him, eyes glistening. "That's all anyone ever really wants, isn't it?" he said. "To be remembered accurately." A nurse knocked softly and entered, checking vitals. She smiled politely at Michael, unaware of the weight of the conversation that had just unfolded. When she left, the room felt heavier again, but also strangely intimate. Michael shifted slightly, wincing. "Pain?" the doctor asked. "A little," Michael said, "but I've lived with pain for a long time. Physical pain is easier. It doesn't lie." The doctor adjusted his position, ensuring he was comfortable. "You've been carrying more than any one person should," he said. Michael laughed quietly, a soft, almost surprised sound. "You know," he said, "people used to tell me I was strong. But strength isn't carrying everything alone. That's survival. Strength is knowing when to let go." He paused. "I'm trying to let go." The doctor took a deep breath. "Of what?" "Of blame," Michael said. "Of needing the world to finally understand me. Of needing apologies that came too late." He closed his eyes briefly. I forgave people who never asked for it, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. The doctor remembered the words Michael had spoken the night before. The clarity, the finality. You've made peace, the doctor said. Michael nodded. As much as I can. A shadow passed over his face. But I worry about my children. The noise will get louder after I'm gone. They'll be pulled into it, whether they want to be or not. The doctor chose his words carefully. They'll have your voice inside them, he said. Not the public one. The real one. Michael smiled again, this time more warmly. I hope so. He reached out weakly, his hand trembling. Without hesitation, the doctor placed his own hand over Michael's. Thank you, Michael said, for seeing me. The doctor felt tears sting his eyes but didn't look away. Thank you, he replied, for trusting me with this. Time passed quietly after that. Michael rested, drifting in and out of sleep. His breathing remained fragile but steady. The doctor stayed close, documenting changes, coordinating care, but never fully leaving. Late in the afternoon, Michael woke again, his energy clearly fading. Doctor, he whispered. Yes. If I don't get another chance to explain myself, Michael said, promise me something else. Anything, the doctor said, his voice unsteady. Promise me you'll remember that I wasn't broken, Michael said. I was wounded. There's a difference. The words hit the doctor with unexpected force. I promise, he said quietly. Michael closed his eyes, the tension easing from his face. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, he looked truly at rest. As evening approached, the doctor stepped back, watching the man before him. Not as a global icon, not as a mystery, but as someone who had finally spoken his truth aloud. And the doctor understood something then with absolute clarity. Whatever the world would say later, whatever stories would be written, whatever arguments would follow, none of them could undo this moment. Because in this room, in this quiet, Michael Jackson had been heard. And that, perhaps, mattered more than anything else. Night returned to hospital with a heavy stillness, as if the building itself sensed what was coming. The corridors grew quieter, footsteps softer, voices lower. In Michael Jackson's room, the lights were dimmed, casting long shadows across the walls. The machines continued their steady rhythm, indifferent to the emotional weight filling the space. Michael was awake again, but this time, only barely. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Each breath looked like a conscious effort, as though his body was negotiating whether it had the strength to continue. The doctor stood beside the bed, monitoring every change, every subtle signal. Years of medical training told him what his heart already knew. Time was running out. Michael opened his eyes slowly. Doctor, he whispered. I'm here, the doctor said immediately, leaning closer so Michael wouldn't have to strain. Michael's lips curved into the faintest smile. You always say that. And I always mean it, the doctor replied. Michael took a breath that trembled halfway through. I don't have much energy left, he said, so I need to choose my words carefully. The doctor felt a tightening in his throat. Take your time, he said. I'm listening. Michael's gaze drifted past him toward the darkened window. Do you know what hurts the most? He asked softly. The doctor shook his head. Not the pain, Michael said. Not the loneliness. Not even the fear. He swallowed with difficulty. It's the moments I miss being normal, sitting on the floor, laughing too loud, being imperfect without consequences. His eyes glistened. I never learned how to exist without being watched. The doctor felt helpless in a way medicine could not fix. You gave the world so much, the doctor said gently. Michael turned his head slowly. I know, he said, but I wish people understood that giving isn't the same as being empty. I still had things inside me, dreams, fragile ones. A pause followed, broken only by the soft of the machines. Promise me something else, Michael said suddenly. The doctor nodded. Yes. When people talk about me, Michael said, his voice barely audible now, I don't want them to say I was tragic, or strange, or broken. He struggled to breathe again. The doctor adjusted his position carefully. I want them to say I tried, Michael continued, that I try to love loudly in a world that prefers cruelty. that I tried to stay gentle when it would have been easier to become hard. Tears welled in the doctor's eyes. You succeeded, the doctor said, his voice breaking. You really did. Michael exhaled, as if releasing something he had been holding for decades. That means more than you know, he whispered. Another silence fell, deeper this time. Michael's chest rose and fell more slowly now. The doctor checked his vitals, his hands steady despite the storm inside him. Then Michael spoke again, barely more than air. Doctor, can I ask you something? Of course, the doctor said. Will you remember this version of me? Michael asked, not the one on the stage, not the one in headlines. This one. The doctor didn't hesitate. I will remember you exactly like this, he said. Honest, tired, brave. Michael's eyes filled with tears. One slipped down his cheek. Then I'm not afraid anymore, he said. The doctor reached out, holding Michael's hand firmly now, grounding him. A nurse entered quietly, her expression grave. She checked the monitors, then looked at the doctor with a subtle nod. They both knew. Michael's breathing became irregular. Doctor, he whispered one last time. I'm here, the doctor said, barely able to keep his voice steady. Michael gathered what little strength remained and said the words that would stay with the doctor forever. Please, tell the world I wasn't alone at the end. The doctor felt something inside him shatter. You weren't, he said through tears. You're not alone. I'm right here. Michael's eyes fluttered. His grip loosened slightly. And thank you, Michael whispered, for seeing me when I was just me. Those were his final clear words. Moments later, the machines began to change their rhythm. Alarms sounded softly, not urgent at first, then unmistakably final. The nurse moved quickly, then stopped. The room held its breath. Time was called. The doctor stood frozen, still holding Michael's hand long after it had gone still. The world outside the room continued on, cars driving, lights glowing, lives unfolding, but inside, everything had stopped. He closed Michael's eyes gently. For a long moment, the doctor didn't move. He had been present for death before, many times, but never like this, never with words that carved themselves so deeply into his memory. Later, when paperwork was completed and the room grew quiet again, the doctor sat alone. He replayed the conversations in his mind, the vulnerability, the forgiveness, the final request. Tell the world I wasn't alone. The doctor realized then that medicine had not been the most important thing he gave that night. Presence was. Years would pass. Interviews would be given. Stories would be told. Speculation would never end. But this doctor would carry something no one could take away. The truth of a man who, in his final hours, was not an icon, not a myth, but a human being who had finally been heard. And every time the doctor thought of Michael Jackson after that night, it was not the music that echoed first in his mind. It was his voice, soft, grateful, at peace. The room did not feel empty immediately after Michael Jackson passed. That was the strange part. The machines had gone quiet. The monitors no longer flashed with urgency. The nurses had stepped out, their movements slow and respectful. Yet something remained, an invisible presence that lingered in the air, heavy and intimate, as if the room itself was still holding on to him. The doctor stayed. He sat in the chair beside the bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together. His eyes were fixed on Michael's still form, half expecting the chest to rise again, half afraid that if he looked away, the reality would finally crash down on him. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost its structure. In medical school, they taught him how to pronounce death. They taught him how to detach, how to move on to the next patient, the next emergency, the next life that still needed saving. What they never taught was how to sit with the weight of a soul that had just left the world. Michael lay peacefully now. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, his face looked relaxed, no tension in his brow, no effort in his breathing, no fear in his eyes, just stillness. The doctor stood and gently adjusted the sheet, covering Michael fully. His hands moved slowly, reverently, as if performing a sacred ritual rather than a medical task. "I hope you know," he said quietly, unsure why he was still speaking aloud. "You mattered." The words echoed softly and disappeared. Outside the room, the hospital began to wake. Phones rang. Doors opened. Somewhere a baby cried. Life, indifferent and unstoppable, continued its rhythm. But for the doctor, the world had shifted when he finally stepped into the hallway. Nurses and staff looked at him with solemn understanding. No one asked questions. No one needed to. The news was already spreading through the building in hushed tones. "It's him," someone whispered. "Michael Jackson," another voice replied. The doctor walked past them, feeling strangely disconnected from the name. To him, Michael was not a global icon or a breaking news headline. He was the man who had asked not to be alone, the man who wanted to be remembered as human. Hours later, when the official announcements were made and the hospital was surrounded by media, the doctor watched from a distance. Cameras flashed. Reporters spoke rapidly, speculating, narrating, simplifying. He felt an unexpected anger rise in his chest. They were already turning Michael into a story. That evening, after his shift ended, the doctor went home but did not sleep. He sat in his living room with the lights off, replaying the final conversations again and again. Every word, every pause, every breath. He realized something unsettling Michael had known. Not just that he was dying, but that his story would never truly belong to him once he was gone. And yet, despite that knowledge, Michael had chosen honesty over bitterness. Days passed. The memorials began. Fans gathered by the thousands, then the millions. Candles, flowers, music pouring from speakers and car radios. Tears from people who had never met him, but felt as though they had lost a part of their own lives. The doctor watched the memorial service on television, alone. When the crowd sang, he felt a lump in his throat. When the children appeared, he had to look away. He remembered Michael speaking about them, his voice filled with love and fear and hope all at once. Be better than the pain, Michael had said. Break the cycle. The doctor wondered how much strength that had taken. Weeks later, the doctor was asked, quietly, carefully, if he would be willing to speak about Michael's final hours. Not to the press, not publicly, but for official records, for clarity, for truth. He agreed. In the sterile conference room, he spoke calmly, factually. He described the medical details, the timeline, the efforts made. But when they asked about Michael himself, his state of mind, his final moments, the doctor paused. He was lucid, he said, reflective, gentle. He hesitated, then added he wasn't afraid. The room was silent. "What made you say that?" someone asked. The doctor thought of Michael's final words. The gratitude, the release. He had already made peace, the doctor said simply. After that day, the doctor returned to his work. Patients came and went. Emergencies demanded his focus. Life insisted on continuing. But something in him had changed. He listened more closely now, sat longer at bedsides, spoke more gently. He no longer rushed conversations that felt important. He understood, perhaps for the first time, that healing was not always about curing. Sometimes it was about witnessing. Years later, when interviews, documentaries, and debates still rage about Michael Jackson, about his life, his choices, his pain, the doctor never participated. He never corrected the narratives or challenged the myths. He didn't need to. He carried his own truth. On rare occasions, when someone recognized his name and asked, "What was Michael Jackson really like at the end?" the doctor would pause before answering. Then he would say, "He was tired, he was kind, and he wanted to be understood." That was all. And every time he said it, he honored the promise he had made in that quiet hospital room. To remember Michael not as a legend frozen in spectacle, but as a man who, in his final moments, found the courage to speak honestly, forgive deeply, and let go peacefully. The world would always argue about Michael Jackson, but the doctor knew something the world never fully would. At the end, there was no music, no stage, no spotlight, only a human being, finally seen, and that was enough.